Welcome to the Smarter Science of Slim, the scientifically proven program where you eat more and exercise less to burn fat and boost health.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everybody, Jonathan Bailor back with an extra special, a bonus Smarter Science of Slim show. The reason I say extra special is today's guest is one of those guests that has a special place in my heart, because not only is she an inspiration for me, but she and I have had a quote-unquote relationship. And by relationship, I mean we've exchanged emails for like 3 or 4 years, really, when both of us first came on to the internet scene in a somewhat noticeable way, her much more than I at the time, given her amazing blog work. And it's just been a wonderful journey together. And I also learned, and we're going to prove this during the show, that we both can say the alphabet backwards, which we will prove on the show today. And she is none other than the author of the epic and upcoming book, Death by Food Pyramid: How Shoddy Science, Sketchy Politics, and Shady Special Interests Ruined Your Health, and How to Reclaim It. She is the Denise Minger. Denise, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, well, Denise, I just realized something. We're not recording video. I guess even if we could sort of cheat the system here, but this whole saying the alphabet backwards is an ambitious claim, but because we're behind computers, people will be like, well, you just read it off your screen backwards, so we might have to say it so fast that we are proving that we're actually doing this from memory.
I'm up for the challenge.
Are you up for it? Okay, so I'm going to do a 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
And then we're going to do the alphabet backwards quickly.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. 3, 2, 1. ZYXWV UTS RQP ONM LKJ IHGF EDCBA. Boom! First ever tandem backwards alphabet recording ever.
It's a very important skill.
That is Guinness Book of World Records for most alphabets said backwards simultaneously by 2 authors who are releasing books on the same day ever.
Kind of miraculous.
Well, Denise, on to more important subjects.
I don't know if that's not important.
So obviously, all the listeners of the show know and love you for your awesome work to debunk bad science. And before we dig into the book itself, which of course everyone needs to grab a copy of, and that's Death by Food Pyramid, comes out the exact same day as the Calorie Myth. So you got the wonderful 1-2 punch there coming out on New Year's Eve. Death by Food Pyramid. Again, grab a copy. But Denise, what I wanted to focus on today was 2 things. The first question is, over the past year, I have had the fortune to chat with some amazing people on the show, people with very divergent beliefs, right? Like, I mean, I've had, Dr. Campbell, who obviously knows of you, and you know of him on the show twice. And I'm amazed to see. So there's really smart people in the world. You're a smart person. There's a lot of smart people. How do we have smart people who believe, like, it's not even as if there's ambiguity. It's like this smart person thinks white. This smart person says black is true. Like, with absolute certainty, smart people are saying opposite things. How do we make sense of that in our brain?
It's one of those things that's incredibly challenging. Also for me, to interact with different people who have these widely different beliefs, but they're so confident about it and they have so much intelligence. And I think it's kind of a symptom of the fact that nutritional science, as well as many of our other fields, are still kind of in their dark ages. And I think there's still so much that we're learning about food, about health. It's very difficult to conduct studies that are truly conclusive, especially with humans. And I think there's just more gray zone than most people realize. And so when 2 people approach the same set of data or they look at the same topic, first of all, they're coming in with this like background in their mind, this context that they've already conceived of, that's flavoring the way they look at things. But at the same time, there's really a lot of question marks that still exist. So I think there's room for these divergent opinions to coexist in ways that, I don't know, I still struggle with it too, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, and it's not presented as gray. And that's the thing that breaks my mind a little bit, right? What I hear people say is just point blank, things like the following, which of course you're familiar with. Animal protein causes cancer. Saturated fat causes heart disease. Like, those are not ambiguous claims. They are incredibly confident claims. And then you pop over to another person's blog who is just as smart and potentially just as qualified. It literally says the opposite. So, like, what do we do as a consumer?
I would say the first thing we need to keep in mind is that most human beings are uncomfortable with ambiguity. So if you're presented with a situation that is a gray zone, we just have this inbuilt tendency to see things in black and white. And I think for a lot of people, there's this discomfort in question marks and in not knowing and in admitting that we're not certain about something. So when people approach nutrition in particular, I think we just have a tendency to go with the thing that either confirms our pre-existing beliefs or the first thing that we see that looks like it could be true to us, and we just latch onto that, and that becomes our reality at that point. It's very difficult to entertain different ideas and I guess acknowledge where our confidence is limited. I think that people just have a tendency to choose a side.
In the spirit of choosing a side, I'm curious as to which side you will choose and why to those two questions. One, does animal protein cause cancer? And two, does saturated fat cause heart disease?
I would have to say, generally speaking, no to both. I do think but again, this goes back to there being some gray zones. And I think that different people, this is something that I was reading a lot about when I was researching my latest book, my only book, I guess. And that is, there are different, genetic components to how we handle saturated fat, how we metabolize it. You have the ApoE4 stuff, people who react differently to different forms of fat, including saturated fat. And so there might be like I think you can link together different pieces to say, well, in certain contexts, these foods might have a certain effect. And then with meat, there's always issues with how it's prepared and different carcinogens forming during different cooking methods. But the blanket statement of animal protein causes cancer and saturated fat causes heart disease, not only are they untrue, but I think they've really done the entire nutrition field a disservice.
And it also seems, Denise, this now bleeds into the second big question, which is this position of no, animal protein does not just blanketly cause cancer, and no, saturated fat does not just blanketly cause heart disease, is still thought of as contrarian when, for example, the Harvard Medical School has published in the Journal of the American Medical Association statements saying, like, saturated fat does not cause heart disease, and have gone on record saying that we did giant meta-analyses, and, like, for example, the Women's Health Initiative study, those who ate the most protein there was no problem there. I mean, so you've got these giant mainstream institutions also making these statements, yet it's still considered the contrarian point of view. What's going on there?
I think that's a testament to how deeply ingrained conventional wisdom has become in the American conscience. And I think if you look at our history of dietary guidelines, we've had this slow progression, starting after the 1950s with Ancel Keys and his stuff, moving towards condemning saturated fat. And it's so hard to undo these things that have been repeated so many times that we've ended up accepting them as truth. In psychology, there's actually something called the truth or the illusion of truth effect, which happens when you hear a statement repeated enough times. It doesn't matter where you've heard it. It doesn't matter if it was actually true or not. You end up accepting it as fact just because it's so ubiquitous. And I think in the case of a lot of our beliefs right now, like, you need whole grains to be healthy, you need to limit your saturated fat to avoid heart disease, they have had so much momentum over the course of many decades that even these new things coming out that seem to undo that, it's almost not enough yet. It's like we're going to have to wait, I think, decades at this point, again, maybe, before the mainstream hops on board with a new line of thought.
And even the people who advocated it, I'm sure if anyone else in the world knows this, you certainly do. I mean, in the USDA's, their giant guidelines document, for example, they acknowledge there is no absolute requirement for carbohydrate for human health. And they say that openly, but it doesn't seem to affect their recommendations.
No, the recommendations are not based on science alone, unfortunately. And I mean, I'm not someone who thinks that everyone or even most people should be on a low carbohydrate diet. I think that there's a lot of ways to tailor diets to be healthy, like regardless of macronutrient content. But in the case of the USDA and these guidelines that keep coming out, they're basically being bullied by the food industry to avoid saying certain things, to avoid discouraging Americans from eating less of anything. If you look carefully at the way things are phrased, it's all choose more lean meats. It's not saying eat less red meat. It's saying, moderate your sugar intake, not eat less sugar. And it's very interesting. It's an interesting lesson in rhetoric if you look at how their guidelines are phrased. And I think it discloses their bias pretty heavily.
After all of this research, Denise, the book, I believe, does an amazing job of this, and correct me if I'm wrong of this, because I'm just getting into it now, is this historical account of what went wrong. But I'm curious, you do have that and how to reclaim it. So with this really objective, and that's what you're known for. You're known for being objective and just looking at the data and communicating the data. What came out the other end in terms of the recommendations? What should the recommendations from our government be?
I personally don't think our government should be giving any recommendations on the topic of health. And I think the problem occurs when you're trying to prescribe a universal diet to an incredibly diverse population, people with different health histories, with different backgrounds, different needs nutritionally, and to say that everyone can eat an identical assortment of foods and have the same reaction to it physically, I think is just hogwash. I think that we really need to focus more on individual variation and respecting where each person finds success with a certain diet versus another person. And so anytime the government is going to give out these blanket recommendations, it's going to be targeted hopefully to the majority, but there's always going to be these people on either end of the bell curve who are going to get left in the dust, and for whom these recommendations, even if they were great recommendations, are not going to have the intended effect. So my whole thought with the government, they can stick with supporting agriculture if they need to. Obviously, the USDA needs to support farmers and whatnot for the economy. But the whole let's have the government interfere with what we're eating, I just don't think it's possible for that ever to work out well.
And that certainly makes sense. And that said, if the government isn't making guidelines, like people are going to get and seek out guidelines from somewhere, certainly. Right. So whoever's doing it, what would you think those guidelines should be?
First of all, I would say, just as a core recommendation, people really need to avoid vegetable oils, the highly industrially processed, high omega-6 stuff that's just in everything these days. Pretty much all of the cheapest foods that the government subsidized, I think, are the things that we need to avoid. Refined corn and grain products, high fructose corn syrup, sugar added to things. And I think we really need to move back maybe a century or two or three or four or whatever and look at the foods that are the most nutrient dense. Eat the entire animal if you're going to be an omnivore. Choose vegetables that are fresh. Have your own garden. I'm really hesitant to make a blanket recommendation for everyone, but I think that just avoiding these highly modern foods that really have coincided with our rapid health decline, I think just doing that alone is a great step for anybody.
Denise, that's such a reasonable, that seems to be the single most reasonable and intuitively correct explanation anyone could give, right? Eat the things that we ate before we had these problems.
Right.
Why? Why doesn't that message seem to stick? It makes so much sense.
I have no idea. It makes too much sense. People don't like things that make sense. We just have to make it more complicated. A big part of it is this, I think, the pill mentality that has pervaded society, which is that let's just take a pill for the things that are, giving us a problem. Let's just have these quick fixes. Let's keep eating these junky foods that taste good and are kind of feeling addictive, and treat ourselves with statins and with medications, high blood pressure medications and all that, instead of actually getting to the root of the problem. And I think that the reason we don't hear the simple advice, even though it makes so much sense, is because we're having all these competing voices from big industries kind of taking over the bullhorn and telling us different things.
Based on all this research you've done, Denise, if let's say I'm a single mother who is I don't have a lot of money and I don't have a lot of time, and for example, I have to choose between eating conventionally raised and prepared meat Like that's it. Like I'm either going to eat that or I'm not going to be eating meat because I can't afford anything else. What would be your recommendation in that context?
That's always a tough one, and I know a lot of people are in that kind of situation. I know Rob Wolf has a good recommendation, which I kind of agree with, which is that if you're going to go with conventional meat, choose lean meats to avoid the toxin buildup in the fat, and then just add supplementary fat from other sources if you can get it. But in that case, this is actually something I tend to do because I'm not a big meat eater myself. My diet is actually mostly plant-based, which is very ironic. But what I do is I focus on the parts of the animal that are the most nutrient dense, which is, the liver and the other organ meats. I like to make bone broth. And for people who don't have a lot of money or don't have access to really high quality animals, I would say focus on getting the most nutrition out of the animals you can access. A lot of times you can find organ meats for very inexpensive, much cheaper than muscle meats. And so for people who are in that situation, I don't think that a high meat intake is going to be necessary. But to cover your nutritional bases, just focus on the parts of the animal that are going to supply the most nutrition for the least amount of money.
Denise, moving on now to specifically this book, Death by Food Pyramid, which is just a wonderful title. What is your hope for this book? Like, what is the hope, the outcome you want this book to have on society?
I want people to think. Honestly, and not just about our, the USDA's recommendations, not just about the conventional wisdom, but I want people to really critically evaluate all of the claims they hear about their health. And that includes things from the alternative health communities, including communities I generally support, like the ancestral health movement. I think that our biggest deficiency right now is that people will just kind of osmotically absorb the information that's surrounding them without ever putting it through their own filters. And we tend to get intimidated by people with PhDs and people who have a lot more credentials than we have. And we tend to think that science is this big, lofty thing that's kind of floating out in the abyss, and that we as lay people cannot access it unless we've gone through a lot of schooling and that we've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a PhD education. And so what I really want to do is I want to open and bridge the gap between the general public and science, and nutritional science in particular. Because right now I just feel like people are afraid almost of accessing this knowledge that's out there. And it's because I think we doubt ourselves, and because we've never been taught that we have our own personal power to understand these things. So really, I just want the book to empower people to think critically and to take their health into their own hands instead of outsourcing it to whatever guru or expert they come across.
When you say taking your health into your own hands, Denise, I think that's such a powerful message, because I'm sure you experience the same kind of thing, which is this daily inundation of very specific and nuanced questions like, are sweet potatoes good or bad? And it's kind of like, well, when you eat sweet potatoes, does it help you reach your goals, or does it hurt you from stop you from reaching your goals, rather than like this global statement for all people ever, in any circumstance ever, should they eat sweet potatoes or not? That doesn't seem like it's necessarily even a productive conversation to have. It seems like the productive conversation is, are sweet potatoes helping me to achieve my specific goals?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a big problem right now, is we've kind of divided a lot of foods into this segregated list of good versus bad. And I think that does a disservice to the entire understanding of nutrition. And I think that it does a disservice to people who are trying to get healthy, because that good and bad distinction is often, again, it's like a shade of gray thing. And I think it's another expression of this black and white thinking. So I definitely agree with that.
Well, Denise, you've got this book coming out on the 31st, New Year's Eve, Death by Food Pyramid, How Shoddy Science, Sketchy Politics, and Shady Special Interest Ruined Your Health, and How to Reclaim It. So what is next for you in 2014? Is it a giant, skywriting tour to help people learn how to understand, or what's coming up next for you?
Sleeping a lot.
Nice.
Sleeping a lot. I'm kind of in recovery mode right now, as you've probably experienced. Writing a book is a very draining experience, and think there tends to be a period after that where you just have to take care of yourself for a while. But I really would like to get back into blogging more frequently. I just posted the other day the first blog post that I've written in a year and a half. And it felt very good to write it. It felt very good to post it and resume interacting with just the wonderful people out there who are exploring the same topics I'm interested in. So I would really like to continue blogging. I'm hoping to speak at some conferences and just, I don't know if I'll be doing a tour or whatever, but it's kind of a question mark right now. So who knows?
Well, Denise, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I'm going to try to enroll you in a movement that I think you are already supporting based on page 224 of your book. So page 224 of your book has this fabulous drawing that would only be created by someone like Denise because she's got that awesome left brain action going on. And it's these like 3 or 4 overlapping triangles that basically show how diets, which are presented to us as completely different and mutually exclusive things, have a lot in common. So Denise, how much do you think, how passionate are you about trying to get people who all agree that processed garbage is bad and things you find in nature are better than that, to work together to get the 99% of the American population who doesn't yet know or believe that to be healthier and not die?
I think that's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what we need right now. We need to stop arguing with each other because that's really holding back a lot of our progression in terms of what we're learning and how we're moving forward with our understanding of nutrition. Because, we have all these rivaling diet communities and they're just like, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. And we fail to see, that central core that we can all focus on, and that's the message we should be spreading instead of focusing so much on attacking each other.
You're so spot on, Denise. I often wonder, I don't actually think this is happening, but I often wonder if like General Foods has someone who just like goes on to blogs and internet discussion boards and like riles up the internet nutrition community so that they'll just spend their time arguing with each other while they kill millions of people a year on their processed garbage.
If they don't have that as a strategy now, they probably will after you said that.
Because it's like, oh yeah, you guys keep infighting. We'll just go over here and keep telling, it's only 140 calories. Coke's not that bad for you. Denise, well, I love it. Well, where can folks go to learn more about you and the new book, Death by Food Pyramid?
So my blog is www.rawfoodsos.com. And I think I have the domain deniseminger.com as well that redirects there, so you can try that if that's easier. And my book is available on Amazon. It should be available in major retail stores, I think, starting after January 1st. And right now you can actually get it mailed to you sooner from Mark's Daily Apple, from primalblueprintpublishing.com. And if you go there, there's an option to order the book, and I think you get some freebies if you order it before December 31st or by December 31st. So those are your options for reading that. And other than that, people can email me or do whatever they want, send, bottle messages, smoke signals. I'm not for it all.
I love it. Well, Denise, thank you so much for joining us today for the massive amount of time. I mean, of course, folks, this is now old news, but if you haven't read Denise's work that she's made freely available to the world that has to do with a very popular book that was published many moons ago, she's an amazing woman. She's an amazing example for all of us. So I just so appreciate all the time and effort you put into, frankly, saving lives, Denise. So kudos to you, and friends, please go check out Death by Food Pyramid. If it is at all like Denise's previous work, which I'm sure it is fabulous. So Denise Minger, again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this wonderful conversation as much as I did. Again, today's guest, the brilliant Denise Minger, her book, Death by Food Pyramid. Check it out. And remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Chat with you soon. Wait, don't stop listening yet.
You can get fabulous free SANE recipes over at carriebrown.com.
And don't forget your 100% free eating and exercise quick start program, as well as free, fun, daily tips delivered right into your inbox at bailorgroup.com. That's BAILOR group.com.